I had the experience of working with a gang leader when I was working on my PhD. That's why nobody's going to kiss me, because I think they'll die of a tropical disease, right? So don't let the fear stop you. Step out and do it anyway. They looked at me and they said, oh, that must be very interesting studying insects. So guys, what do you think of that? Do you think I'm doing a good job of messing up their heads?
Hi everyone, and welcome to the new episode of a new SciPod in collaboration with a new Red Crescent Society. This is the place where we break down complex scientific ideas into easy-to-understand language. Whether you are passionate about science or just curious to learn something new, we are here to help you and to make the latest research both accessible and exciting for you all. So my name is Usman Balkya, and I'm a second-year biological sciences student.
Hello everyone, my name is Nazarbayev. I am a third-year biological science student. Today we have an exceptional guest, Dr. Byron, who is a distinguished epidemiologist and global health expert. His dedication to strengthening healthcare systems across the world has taken him from El Salvador to Armenia, Saudi Arabia, Suriname, Kazakhstan, and many other countries. With a PhD from Johns Hopkins University, his work spans infections and chronic diseases, maternal health, HIV, and TB programs. He has contributed not only to on-the-ground healthcare solution, but also to public health policy and education through his work with the World Health Organization.
In this episode, we will dive into Dr. Byron's fascinating journey, his global contributions, and his insights into the future of epidemiology, biostatistics, and global health research.
Let's get started. Hello, Dr. Byron.
Hello.
We are very happy to have you here today. So how are you feeling?
Is this your first experience of being in podcast or similar?
I've been in other panels and discussions, but not really an official podcast, so to speak. So this is a first in that sense, yeah.
We're happy to be the first one.
Oh, it's nice. It's very nice.
So we want to first start with your social contribution. As we know, you had a very active social life. You helped to develop public health in different places. And it all, as we know, it all started in El Salvador, where you helped to establish a clinic and also trained health workers. So can you tell us more about how this all started and maybe how this idea came to you?
Well, actually, it started when I was born, which I think happens to most of us here. And actually, it was prior to that. I actually had a physics degree, and I worked at Open Door Clinic as a sort of a therapist for homeless people. I worked with war displaced and refugees coming from other countries. I worked with really poor kids who had less opportunities to go to university in the inner city. African Americans, Mexican Americans, and who were working in the fields, and First Nation people. So I have a whole history of doing that before changing my field, but I really didn't change it. It was still because I had a connection with the world and the people around me. I just continued what I was continuing to do, and it just seemed appropriate to start moving towards the many different fields of public health and moving that direction and ending up in El Salvador, where I worked for 4 years. Yeah.
So what kind of challenges you faced there, or maybe some interesting stories?
It kind of crystallized all my values. You don't know about yourself until you challenge yourself to the extreme, when you don't know what you can accomplish. And this wasn't like I just went down to it because there was a war there. It was a civil war. And I didn't just go down there because, oh boy, civil war, I get to go to a war. No, I had gone down and I'd been working with refugees from El Salvador, from nearby Guatemala, and other countries in Central America. It's a Spanish-speaking country. And I started taking trips down there. So I knew exactly what the situation was. And I knew I could make a difference. I felt that there was some way I could make a difference in people's lives there. And that was kind of led me to moving down there and trying to make those changes that would really perhaps change people's lives and change my life, because it was really about being connected with the world, and being connected with, with something that is meaningful, something that really is going to give meaning to your life. I don't want to be just, I felt this way since I was 11. I don't want to be lying. I remember when my great grandmother was dying in her bed, and she had regrets. And I didn't want to be lying in my deathbed. I want to lay in my deathbed with a big smile on my face and say, I celebrated life with people all over the world. I did something with my life. And this was an incredible experience. And I can I pull from just one person from my physics background? Richard Feynman, who won the Nobel Prize of Physics. Brilliant man, just a fun guy. He's one of those guys that you would enjoy sitting down with a cup of coffee and talking, or chai.
Which year it was?
Oh, I never had a chance to talk to him. It's just something he said that always stayed with me. Believe me, I never had a chance to know him because he died very young with gastric cancer, which is a serious problem in Kazakhstan. Lots of people die very young with gastric cancer here. And he had inoperable gastric cancer, and he was dying. And somebody was very sad and told him, I realize you're going to leave. He said, well, it's kind of a bummer, but it's okay, because I feel like I've told my stories. And when you can feel like you've told your stories, what your life is about, then I think you have some value in your life, and you can move on, and you can feel like you've had an extraordinary life,
Absolutely.
And so I think that's kind of where I am, and this is where it follows me and leads me to doing crazy things,
You said that you wanted to change people's life, and can we consider it like your internal motivation to work in a public health field?
Absolutely, but it doesn't have to be in public health. It could be in biology. I don't know what other fields do we have in here? Just, can I ask?
Yes.
In what? Economics is great. I should tell you guys that public health was one of those places where we have a huge field called health economics. We have health management, we have epidemiology, we have biostatistics, we have environmental health, we have occupational health, we have behavioral sciences and health. We've got many, many, many fields, right? And it was one of the things that appealed to me because I could work in all of those. I could do something in every one of those and learn and grow and change and be connected with people around me, because, we all need people. We're all very communal, and this is a way to connect with people in a really intimate and powerful way. It makes a real difference in your life, as well as perhaps you hope in the lives of people around you.
And talking about the challenges when you face some failures towards achieving some kind of your goal or dream, how do you usually face it, or how do you stay motivated?
Well, just go back to El Salvador. I had people who were killed, who died on me, who were tortured. And, when you feel like you can help them along the way, you can perhaps provide them with accompany them, to be with them, to make a difference. And then they die. And sometimes you feel like maybe you're responsible. I had the experience of working with a gang leader when I was working on my PhD, a gang leader in Baltimore by the name of Taz. And I was trying to help them get out of this cycle of just dying all the time, being killed or ending up in prison. And I helped him get a particular certification in computer science so he could get a job. Nobody would hire him because they knew he had a reputation as being a gang leader. I felt guilt. I still to this day feel like I failed somehow. I remember when we parted, when I last saw him, he said, "Byron, you tried, man. There's just no way out." And that's what he told me. But you have a sense that you failed, but in a sense, that's also self-motivating. In a sense, it tells me about something about myself, that I have felt failure. I have felt pain. I have felt their pain often. And when you do that, you can feel other people's pain. You can feel other people's struggles. And suddenly that matters. It matters a lot more when you have a better understanding of what they might be going through. It's just being human. It's really humanizing and never forgetting that what we're here for, even if we're going to talk about research later, I see, But even when you're doing research, you remember that all those numbers, all those counts, all those things that you look at are people. They're real living human beings, or they're the world. And that's really, really important.
Yeah, like in statistics, it can be, we can see some numbers of deaths, multiple millions.
Yeah.
But yeah, actually, I agree with you. There are a lot of people and personal story connected
Always.
to those numbers.
You said like public health consists many majors,
Yes.
and I want to ask about what's your maybe favorite part of your job, maybe that gives you satisfaction.
Right now, I mean, when I was in El Salvador, I had a direct impact on people's lives. Starting a clinic up in the mountains, working with war displaced, trying to provide food or resources. There was a huge outbreak of typhoid. I mean, I always tell people that I am especially gifted because I've had all kinds of tropical diseases, which includes typhoid, paratyphoid, dengue,
Wow.
malaria, and filariasis and others. And I said, that's why nobody's going to kiss me, because I think they'll die of a tropical disease, right? So, that's not entirely true. But it's something that when you're there and you're experiencing life with people, it's you always remember those are the people that you care about, what was the question?
What's your most favorite part of your work that gives you like a
It is
satisfaction?
being there with people and celebrating life, even when things are really difficult. I don't know if you know who Viktor Frankl is, but he wrote Man's Search for Meaning. He went through a tough time because he was in the concentration camps during World War II, but he came out alive. But even in the middle of that darkness, he celebrated life. And to have meaning, even in the time that you have, to have meaning with people is really, really, it's everything. It's really important. It's really important. When you touch the world comes back and touches you. And you can celebrate life because you have to celebrate life. That's what it's really about.
From your experience and from what you've said us, I noticed some of your core values radiating from this experience, like helping people, like creating necessary conditions to improve their lives. And also, I noticed that you have also empathy and a lot of those values that helped you to go through some challenges. So, can you tell us how these values were developed over time?
Yeah, there's always the argument of nature and nurture, because I know my father was always empathetic and kind, and you wonder if maybe there's a genetic connection or if this is the way you were raised. But if you can imagine how you feel if you were in that person's place when they're struggling and suffering, when they're having difficulties, if you can put yourself in that person's place, you're never there because they're there. You'll never fully understand it, but you can connect to that person. That's a gift. And it might be close friends, but if you can imagine feeling those things for people maybe you've never met before and expanding that even further, I think it's something that we're community. And if you want to be connected to people, people will be connected to you. And that's empathy. And it's kind of like if you practice it, the people will come to you, and it will be in a wonderful life, And in some ways, it's kind of selfish because you gain so much from it, but you're not doing it because of that. You're not doing it because of your own gains. So in some ways, I don't think I'm special. I don't think it's anything that anybody can do. It's just that more I worked with people like homeless people or with gangs or with poor kids or First Nation people, the Native Americans that came to the Americas the first time, or in El Salvador with war displaced, or in the disasters that I worked in with the WHO in the flood disasters with people who were struggling to survive. Then suddenly I have a connection with them. And all those experiences have crystallized more and more, have built my values and built my kind of understanding of myself as well as the world and the people around me.
What are other your core values apart from those we mentioned?
I like to play chess. Does that count? No.
I think it's more like a hobby, but
No,
also
I
interesting to
actually like
know.
doing a little bit of everything. No, core values, I think, is it being adventurous, is not being afraid. Not being afraid, that's not true because I was, you may not believe this, but I was pathologically shy. When I was a child, I didn't talk to anybody. I could never do this. I couldn't do this at all. If there were two of you out there, I couldn't speak in front of you. And I worked really hard to overcome that. Still, even to this day, when I'm speaking, doing speaking engagements or working at a conference or teaching or doing something that involves being in front of people, I sometimes go into a very short period of time, meditation, just preparing myself. I did that for this, to come in and speak. But you know, when I come out of that, I started doing things that brought me out of that. But it connected me in the process of doing that. It connected me more with people and what they're experiencing. And that kind of taught me more that those people out there are struggling and sometimes they're celebrating and I can be with them. And I think that's kind of what changed my life. It's coming out of my shyness, believe it or not, that brought me into a new place that kind of taught me that there's more to, you know, because inside me, I was always thinking and processing things and wondering about the world, you know, but it's kind of like as I came out, because of that, it kind of taught me all these lessons. And I think I just became more humanized, more human. I don't know how to describe it beyond that.
I'm actually very fascinated by your story because I'm also a very shy person, or I'm trying to be like you, less shy, and your story just motivates me to see that it is actually possible
Yeah.
to grow over
I
this.
want to tell you because this is important. I'm scared to death. I was scared to death going in front of people. I started putting myself in plays and theatrical places. Oh
Oh,
man, I would freeze up. I'd be sweating. I'd be shaking, you know, and I'd go out and I'd have to blank it out and say, there's nobody out there. You know, it's hard to see anyway on stage because it's all
yeah,
dark.
yeah.
And there's nobody out there. And then I would just become inside of me. And then I was in speaking events for the same reason. I started getting involved with debate, involved with expository speaking and impromptu speaking and all these other things because I was so afraid. I was so afraid. And then I started learning, and I was really afraid to go down to El Salvador. It didn't make sense because not only was there a greater risk involved with going down there, but it was also it was the unknown, and I also didn't have. I didn't, you know, I had student loans. I had money I had to pay back, and they could delay it, but I knew I wasn't making any money. They gave me $50 a month. That's not much of a stipend. That's all I got for 4 years. $50 a month. That paid for my toothpaste, some food, and then they provided me with a little place to live in, right? That was it. That was it. That wasn't a career choice, you know? And I knew this wasn't a good choice because how do I survive afterwards? What do I do afterwards? So I set aside my fear. I wouldn't let the fear stop me. So don't let the fear stop you. Step out and do it anyway. If you feel like it's right for you, swallow the fear. Get rid of that fear. Hold it back until you've already said yes, and then you can't back out, right? And I would recommend that with anybody. Don't be afraid. If you don't think you can do it anyway. If you've never done it before, do it anyway. If you feel like you want to do it, but you're afraid to do it, you're not sure you can do it anyway. Do it anyway.
I think that maybe some teenagers are watching us, and you said that you were shy.
Very.
Yeah, and I want you so that you give 3 steps like to overcome this shyness.
Yeah.
Maybe we will help them.
Well, fear, again, is swallowing your fear. I don't know how to describe it. It's not like it's still there. I feel anxiety. What I do is I used to be very because cerebral, meaning that, you know, look, I was good at science, I was good at math, I was good at, you know, I was interested in astronomy and the stars that could talk to me when I was outside. You know, there's this magic out there in this whole universe. And I used to, I but I would do things that were safe. But then when I was going to do something, I would say yes. I realized that I could set down these lists. How many people have done lists where you say, these are pros and these are cons to make a decision?
Yes,
I did.
I did.
I stopped doing that because it didn't work for me. Because every time I did that, it seemed not to be the best choice. So now when I talk about intuition, intuition is not something that's fuzzy wuzzy. It's not something that is. It's actually there's processing going on inside your brain, and a lot of processing. And it's a processing, I believe, of values more than logical processing. And when your values dictate your decisions, then I think you make the right decision for yourself. And I think that's something that if you do that, but then the problem is the logic, it says, oh, I can't retire, or this is not a good job choice, or maybe I won't have a partner in life, or maybe I have to take care of my pet dogs. Who's going to feed my dog? I mean, it's kind of all these things that seem to get in the way, but you stop and you say, look, I'm not going to let that fear stop me. Things will work out somehow, some way, and I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. And every time I made those decisions based on that, it always worked out. There were things I thought I could not do, honestly, things that I could not do. And I did them because I didn't let fear stop me. So that's the number one thing, is don't let fear stop you. And the second thing, which was tied into that, was let what feels right to you, let that decide that's you. Let you decide what you should be doing, not what other people do, because pros and cons sounds a lot like what your parents told you, what society told you, what your friends told you, what television told you, what Nazarbayev University told you, and sometimes you have to set that aside for a minute and say, what is my little voice telling me? What am I telling myself? And listen to that. I think that's really, really important. And the fourth, and you give me three or four?
3.
I'm going to take one more.
Okay.
Rely on other people. Always spend time and rely on other people because they're always important. They may be new people that you meet, but always be part of community because that enriches your life and enriches your journey as well. That's it. I stole the extra one there.
We saw that a lot of your researches are focused on matters of developing countries, and I want to ask one question maybe. Why do developing countries interest you as a researcher?
Okay, the first concept that I've thrown out of my head is this concept of developing country. Because people in, quote, poorer countries are no different from people in rich countries, except they don't have a car, maybe they don't have a cell phone, maybe they don't have the iPhone, and maybe they don't have a fancy job, or maybe, and then that's not always true, but then you come to another country where there's lots of money, there are those people who have nothing, right? I mean, you have people in the villages here that are very, very poor. And they're living in a situation that's no different from people living in poorer countries. It's a matter of just there are more people there that are struggling, right? So it was just a matter of concentrate. I just ended up, it was the opportunity. I felt like I could do something there and I would do it. But when I was in the United States, I worked with injection drug users. I worked with gangs. I worked with people who are extremely poor, homeless people on the streets. I even wanted to, just because I wanted to understand it better, I had the opportunity to spend 3 nights as a homeless person. I was at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, the largest, biggest, baddest university on the planet, 150 different degrees in public health, $1 billion of research money all over the world. And here I come in and I say, okay, I contacted an organization that I've been working with that works with homeless people. And I was going to sleep and live under a bridge for 3 nights just to kind of better understand it. I have to look scruffier. I can't look like this. I can't bloody wear a tie, for God's sake. I have to look, the place. And I was just going to spend time with them. And unfortunately, that didn't work out because then somebody was killed under the bridge. And then they said, no, Byron, we can't let you do it. But it would have been a great opportunity for me to better understand their journey and their life, because you don't understand a person's life until you wear the same shoes or walk the same earth they do.
Thank you for your answer. And now I want to talk about a little bit Master of Public Health
Yes.
at NUSOM, because now it's like one of the most popular and truly developed program at NUSOM in Kazakhstan. And as a third year student, I am really interested in this program. And now we see like the end program, the end
Yeah.
product of this program. But as a developer and founder of this program, I want to ask about the path at its beginning. So can you
I will tell you that these kind of skill sets are very useful in public health too, as communications and reaching out to people. And you can always talk to a couple of our people who are in the program right now who
know
came
him.
I didn't invite them, by the way, just because I was afraid and
Invited.
lonely. They came on their own volition. So, but I was in World Health Organization. I made a choice of not staying in academia, not being in academia after I finished my PhD in epidemiology. I already had a master's in biostats. I picked that up on my transition from physics, and it was clearly the place to be if you're trying to make an impact on people's lives, and you want those people's lives to make an impact on you. Because, there's still a selfish aspect of it. You want a great life, you want to get paid for it too, but you want a great life, then public health is a great field, but it's many different fields. We have people working as a health economist. One of our graduates got his PhD, got his PhD in Switzerland. He's a health economist. We got somebody in the United States, maybe they're still in the United States, but got a PhD in behavioral sciences in public health, and is interested in addictive behaviors like gambling. I have people who got degrees more closely related to analytical skill sets. We have some people who've gotten degrees in occupational health, and some people and we got one person who graduated even in health sciences. She's a biology. She graduated in biology from Nazarbayev University. Then she moved on and got her MPH in our program. And then in the process, she got pregnant, not planned, with her husband, but who was also her NU sweetheart. Nazarbayev University sweetheart. And then all of a sudden she became really, really efficient. I said, what changed? She says, when you have a child, you don't have any choice, right? You have to be really, really, really organized. And then she applied, of all places, she's never had a engineering course in her life. I've been involved with engineering courses in physics because of my previous life, but she never had an engineering course in her life. But she applied to environmental sciences in engineering here. And they're all civil engineers, so she had to take some civil engineering courses. She was at the top of her class. It was very stressful because she's the only person that's not an engineer. She's biology. She's an MPH. And she's still here. She's now a postdoc, and I plan to work with her on some environmental health research. So there's a lot of different directions you can take. It's an opportunity to move in many different directions. We tried to build a series of skill sets in different classes. They're going to have a few more. They're going through the pain and suffering of biostats and epidemiology, right? Pain and suffering, right? But they learn it, and they don't realize they know it until they start applying it. And then they'll learn other fields and other courses as well, and other methods that they can use. And the really amazing thing about it is there's so many different ways you can apply these to make a difference in the lives around you and in your own life. And that's kind of like, and we have people now we've got somebody who's managing, she is not a medical doctor, but she's one of the top managers in the university medical system over here. University medical yes. And we have somebody who he came out and he had this idea, because one of the things we're trying to do in the Masters of Public Health program, and actually it's written in because I wanted this to be the same, because for me, my life in public health has been transformational. It's crystallized and changed my life, so I fully understand where I have to be and who I have to be. It's allowed me to become who I am. And so what we want we want this experience to be transformational. So when you come out, you feel different, you feel changed, you're willing to do things that you've never considered doing before. So we have one person who graduated from our MPH. There was this PPE grants that between governments and corporations, large grants. If somebody had a great idea, and he had a great idea, so he wrote something to completely transform neurological rehabilitation centers and to change primary care with hyper-modern, completely radically, revolutionarily new approaches in Kazakhstan. And I'm talking about neurological conditions like strokes or automobile accidents in rehab. And in primary care, it became almost like a home, not a hospital, but like a home for families and children. And he transformed this into the latest and newest ideas, and it became immediately popular. And now they're expanding this. And it's both with the government, some deep involvement, and a large corporation's deep involvement, expanding the abilities and he started in the northern part of the country, now extended down to Astana, is now moving down to Almaty, Shymkent, and all the southern part of the country. So this is what he's doing. And he didn't say he couldn't do it. He's never done anything like this before, but he just did it. And that's what you call transformational, because you just do it. You explore it. And there are people who are very happy doing a lot of analysis, doing a lot of research. A lot of us worked, of course, on the COVID-19, and we could talk a lot about that as well, pandemic. But there's so many different opportunities and so many different directions moving away from this.
Dilnaz, do you feel now more motivated to apply for this program?
Yes, I think that Dr. Byron is a mix of you're not like a doctor, you're like more person that I have never seen about and heard about, and I think you are that people that the person that I really interested in, and I think that the reason for applying for masters in public health, because your story and your values really touch my heart, maybe. Yeah.
So guys, what do you think of that? Do you think I'm doing a good job of messing up their heads? Yeah.
I think you're really doing great.
But exactly, and it shouldn't be me. I think I'm portraying the opportunities in a very lucid, real way. That these are realities, and there's opportunities internationally, there's opportunities in country, and it's just a matter of finding that and moving ahead. And there are people who've gone through different stages and steps who are in different places, not only in Kazakhstan. They might be teaching, they might be doing research, they might be running programs, they might be developing new ideas, but they're working not just in Kazakhstan, but all over the world as well.
Mm-hmm. So now we want to continue about your research,
yes,
as you said, about the biostatistics,
yes,
about all these topics.
Mm-hmm.
And let's start from the biostatistics. And
right.
Many people may assume that biology and statistics are two different fields that are not connected with each other.
Are they two different fields? I'm not going to ask them. They just went through some exams recently.
Well, we assume everybody thinks like that because...
Let me just tell you what biostats really is. You don't really learn it in class. You learn it by doing. And it's looking for patterns. Don't think of it as math. Think of it as looking for patterns of relationships, of things that you might be able to use that will make something work. Maybe an intervention, maybe to protect people, maybe to change people's lives. Because we worry also not just about the outcomes of people, but also their quality of life as well. And so it's actually a set of tools that allow you to, and so is epidemiology, because it's different from the old Soviet ideas that it's just management. It's a set of tools and skill sets that also make sense in study designs. So you want to be able to say, this is what's going on, this seems to help, let's try this will probably work. Or maybe you find something new in your research that is really exciting that could make a difference. And so I have this intellectual interest where I see a new pattern. I want to know what's going on. I still have some things right now in my head that I'm trying to figure out still. Some things that I don't quite know, that I don't quite understand. But it's kind of fun because if I get to go back to it, I get to study, I get to find out what's going on. And it might could make a real difference in people's lives.
How we use biostatistics to work with the numbers. For example, the number of infected people, number of deaths, how this data is analyzed, and how you make conclusions.
Okay, let me start a little bit differently here.
Okay.
Let me start with a paper that I was talking to with PhD students in actually laboratory sciences, which is what we work in population-based studies and research. That could be patient-based, but it's a lot of times it's also population-based in villages or communities, or a group of people have the same diseases, or, it could be anybody, poor people. It depends on who you want to look at and what you want to do. Let's suppose, I have a study that I was involved with, one of my former students from Armenia was involved with, and we looked at people who had open heart surgery. For those people who know CABG, is when, what it is you take an artery out of the leg or some other part of the body because it's plugged up here in the heart, and you need that blood flow. So then you open up, you open yourself up, and then you replace it with this artery. You replace that little vein, in the place of the one that's plugged up to save a person's life. Well, we were looking at what were the risk factors for people getting infected afterwards, because that's a complication with bacterial infections, because they got cut open here in the leg, usually in the leg, but sometimes it could be in the arm. And also, of course, they got cut here. So we have infections that can be very serious. And so we were looking at risk factors for those kind of increases that might increase the risk for having wound infections, what we call wound infections, after this open heart surgery, which would be like any surgery. Anytime you get cut open, you can get infected. So the question is that we saw a seasonal pattern, and we weren't the first. And, I can ask all of you. So this is the problem, and this is what a good researcher does. We saw in the data, we looked at the data patterns, and you saw in a statistically significant increase in the number of cases during the summertime, but in a lot fewer cases during the fall, spring, and winter. Why? If we can figure out why, maybe we can protect more people from getting infected. Why? So maybe you guys know a little bit about it, so you're not allowed to talk. But what would you look for? What could it possibly be? We see the patterns because the statistics show us that. We see the patterns. We did the analysis. We compared seasons. Sure, we know if you have type 2 diabetes, you're more likely to have wound infections. If you're a man, men always die sooner, they get sick sooner. There's only one man out there, so you're going to die sooner than the rest of these women, right? Okay, so and me, don't forget me. We're together on this. And then also if you smoke, and also if, and so these are risk factors we know: obesity, high blood pressure. These are all risk factors for increased risk of having wound infections. That's well established. But nobody understands seasons. Why would summer be, it almost seems like I'm going to have my surgery done in summer, because it seems like, not summer, I'm sorry, that's when you have high risk. I'm going to have my surgery done in fall and in spring or winter, because it seems like there's less chance of getting infected. Okay, so why? Anybody have any hypotheses? Why? What would you look for? And what kind of data would you collect? This is where you become a true biostatistician, because not only do you see the pattern, you don't understand the pattern. Is there something else that you could measure, or something else you could use to test some hypotheses, or what would you look for?
Maybe we look at the temperature.
We looked at temperature, but remember, you're indoors. The temperature is pretty stable. But it's okay, because, we might look at temperature. We can still consider it. it might be a little warmer, hotter, and then people say, oh, and that's what they've suggested, that maybe a temperature means that the bacteria is more active and it's running. But nobody ever looked at research. Nobody looked at a study. Nobody did some statistical analysis to see if warmer temperatures, bacteria likes warmer temperatures, just like we do. We love going to Thailand on the beaches, right? And spending time on there, going to Turkey to spend time on the warm weather, right? Especially when it's winter here. But that didn't, there was no evidence for that. I looked, for other papers. What else? Well, one of the things we looked at, he said, well, supposing the doctors that were really careful, decades of experience, careful in making sure that all of the equipment they used, all of this surgical equipment was very carefully sanitized. Everything they did, washed their hands doubly, made sure everything was sanitized. Better than these younger doctors or these doctors that just came in. Then maybe that the younger doctors get everybody infected. Well, we checked that, but there was no difference. We thought maybe they were taking vacations during the summertime. There was no difference. The vacation times were all mixed up throughout the year. And then I thought, well, maybe there's construction during the summertime, right? So you get more dust kicks up, and then people get infected. But there wasn't any more construction. There was no construction going on at all in this hospital. So then we went back to the temperature idea, right? And I'm thinking, well, there are other parameters, weather parameters, that nobody's ever looked at before on the planet. Everybody's seen this pattern. Everybody's seen the seasonal pattern, but nobody knows why. Nobody has a good explanation for it. So, but there's this meteorological station next to the hospital, close to the hospital. And we collected also humidity. We also looked at temperature, and we looked at air pressure. And that was measured every 4 hours. 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Every 4 hours. So we had huge amounts of measurements. We had 830 people with this open heart surgery. We had huge amounts of these measurements. And we found a highly statistically significant result.
So what was it?
Air pressure. Small changes when the air pressure is higher. That's normal air pressure. I'm talking about, guys, I'm not talking about like, oh, I feel the pressure. I'm underwater. I'm being crushed by the deep pressure. You get these movies where you get people crushed because the pressure is so great, right? Your submarine is collapsing and the person's trying to escape, and it's all these exciting thrillers. Well, it wasn't like that at all. You have the small fluctuations that take place. You have more fluctuations in air pressure during winter and spring and summer because spring and fall because storms coming in. The hotter air means there's less air pressure on you. It's not pressing down as much. And then we find out that the air pressure is strongly associated with when you get infected. And we looked at every single time period. And we were able to go down to every 4 hours and look at when the surgeries were done. 830 surgeries, highly statistically significant. Then we did, and then recently, because we knew nobody would believe us because nobody's ever looked at this before. You talk about biology, you talk about wet lab. Nobody's ever looked at how air pressure affects bacteria. No one. But because we took all this data and we did statistical analysis with this data, with the data that is, and I could talk about these too, because you guys know where that is? Kalachi, sleeping syndrome. That's an interesting analysis right there too. But that's right here in Kazakhstan. That's where everybody fell asleep abnormally. How many people know about this? Not you guys. You don't count. How many people know about this? You're not Kazakh. You do because you're Kazakh. She's the only Kazakh in the room. You remember there's a village where everybody just abnormally collapsed and fell asleep. Ever heard of that? That's only 430 kilometers away. It's on the upper Ishim River. It's a very beautiful river up there. It's a wonderful study. So anyway, that's what we found, is that small changes in air pressure, and we had different types of bacteria, it would stop the bacteria from infecting people. This is the first study of its kind in the world. And that means that we have a very cheap way to keep people from developing wound infections without using antibiotics, which can cause drug resistance, that can protect people from complications after surgery.
And not going far from the topic of
Yes.
biostatistics and using it, we know that disease can spread in different ways. It can cause
Yes.
outbreaks, which means the cases of infection are more than expected. It can go to like epidemic when
Right.
it affects wider area. And the last step, as we all remember, the pandemic, COVID-19, when it affects over like international borders. So how could you explain us the possibility of using biostatistics to predict outbreaks?
Well, one of the things is combining epidemiology with biostatistics, right? One of the ways to predict early on, because the earlier you can catch an outbreak before it becomes an epidemic, before an epidemic becomes a pandemic, is to have something called sentinel surveillance, where you have a few centers, a few polyclinics that immediately, every day, every few hours, send in information to some center. And all of a sudden, there's a peak of new types of diseases or illnesses going on. If it's starting in your country, right? If it's coming from other places, maybe you want to watch the borders. And then you can immediately respond to that and try to control it and try to keep people from spreading it from there. So that's one way, but that's using biostatistical methodologies once you get the data from those places. But you got to have the data system in place. And it also tells you because, oh my God, it does everything for us, because it tells us whether a vaccine's going to work or not. Randomized clinical trials is part of epidemiology. It's going to tell us whether drug use is going to protect people, whether actually masks work, or whether, isolation in the households, lockdowns work. I mean, there's a strange phenomenon, which may not be so strange to you, that we have a lockdown, and of course it slows down the spread of disease because nobody's seeing each other except their immediate family.
Yeah.
And that's when everybody starts having divorces because, they can't stand being around their partner anymore, right, all that time. And, that happens, everywhere in the world. But then they come out, and all of a sudden you have people circulating, and a few people had illness. Now they have a lot more contact with people. And COVID-19 celebrates, right? And you expect that to happen. You expect it to peak up. That's what I fully expected. At the time in COVID-19, I was on a special on a special advisory committee where we met weekly with ERG. Does anybody know what ERG is? The mining company? It's a mining company here based in Kazakhstan. It's Kazakh mining company. And they were concerned about keeping their people healthy. So weekly, we would meet, we would review all the latest research. We would plot the predictive pathway of what the numbers were going to be, what was going to happen at different points in time. What do we know from other countries? And we brought that all together and provided that so they could plan out the best they possibly could to protect their workers, their people that work with the ERG and the mining company. And so that was something that you can do when you're using biostats and using epidemiology, because you understand the research, you understand the data, and you can kind of see the patterns. And you say these patterns are similar to what we've seen in other outbreaks, in other pandemics, and other epidemics. So it's very, very useful. And it's also, unfortunately, this is what happens. Somebody comes in and says, oh, we've got this we found out that somebody said, oh, this looks like it protects you from COVID-19 or from dying. When you develop pneumonia from COVID-19, you're more likely to die, right? And some of you may even know people have died from COVID-19 as a result of pneumonia. And so, one of the things you're trying to do is prevent people from dying who have COVID-19 pneumonia. And there were lots of new drugs, new treatments coming out all the time in the literature. But once it's tested further, because those are early stages, those are observational studies, we know the weaknesses, we know the confounding factors. We knew that they weren't strong. It was not strong evidence. And I know ERG got to really be frustrated with us because we would say, well, there's not enough evidence. We can't draw any conclusion at all. We need more studies, more randomized clinical trials. And when randomized clinical trials came out, there was nothing. And that was sad. And now we do have a treatment, but it was at the tail end of COVID-19. We do have a treatment that will reduce your risk of dying, which is interesting because part of that, development of research in the past was an antiviral that was used to combat HIV when we were just learning about antivirals. And that was now used with some other drugs that are effective in reducing the risk.
When collecting and analyzing health data, are there like common sources of the bias that can affect the accuracy of the results?
Many sources. This is where the epidemiology comes in, not the biostatistics part, but you learn how to identify what we call confounders. But in Spanish, I always like it was Spanish my second language, and I actually taught epi in Spanish, so it's confusión. Now, confusión sounds like confusion because that's the exact same word in Spanish.
Yeah.
What's confusion in Spanish is also confusión because it can confuse the results. And we call it confounding. And it can lead you to the wrong, and you have to learn how to control for that, how to collect the data, how to control for it, how to reduce that confounding, those biases that can remove you to the wrong solutions, the wrong answers. That's why it takes time. That's why we need really well-designed studies, very good data, and it's very, very important to get that. Just like in Kalachi, there's a picture of Kalachi too, where, we're the first to do a comprehensive study, which lasted, this is an outbreak that lasted from 2011 to 2015, and it was an outbreak because it was only confined to Kalachi, Krasnogorsk.
Kalachi? How it was pronounced?
Oh, Kalachi?
Kalachi, yeah.
Yeah. It's just a village. It's a village. Guys, you want to learn nothing about Kalachi, but see lots and lots of YouTube channels. There's probably close to 100 right now on YouTube on Kalachi in about 16, 17 different languages. We're the only ones that have actually conducted a comprehensive collecting data from multiple sources, a comprehensive study of Kalachi to determine what was causing the sleeping syndrome. There are still people out there saying it was ghosts, aliens from outer space. There are even the people who were, quote, scientists, but didn't have any evidence because they didn't want to be embarrassed. They didn't have any evidence, but they said, oh, it's carbon monoxide. It's not carbon monoxide. Oh, it's radon gas. It's not radon gas. And so it was an opportunity for us to really start identifying, looking at the actual evidence, because we're the only ones that had evidence that pointed towards very specific sources. So I won't tell you what that is because this is one podcast. Someday maybe we'll do a podcast just on Kalachi.
Okay. We'll be looking forward to that.
Yeah.
In resource limited settings, like developing countries, is it possible to collect sufficient data?
I would reverse that. I would say sometimes rich countries have very, very poor data.
Why?
I'll give you an example. There was a large study that was looking at cancer tumors, cancer cases in a particular hospital.
All types.
I don't remember now because it wasn't my study, but it was It was one of those cases where they had I think it was specific. It was hard tumors. It wasn't like leukemia. It was hard tumors, and they were looking at different risk factors and different associations. So I think they were looking at different types of cancers, separating them out because all cancers have different profiles of risk factors, right? Different types of risk factors. Some overlap, some don't. And then they found out when they did a study, they weren't finding much. And then they found out that a lot of these tumors, this was in the United States, right? Rich country. They found out that all these tumors report these malignant tumors, cancer tumors, that half of them were not cancer. They were just tumors, benign tumors that weren't causing any problems. The reason they were included in cancer tumors is because they get more money from the state, from the insurance company.
Just to clarify for our audience, could you specify what is benign tumor? And
Oh, I'm
malignant?
sorry. Benign means it doesn't cause cancer. It doesn't keep growing and growing. You can have a growth on you that's not going to cause you any problems. It's not going to kill you. It's not going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and taking over all the other cancer cells, right? These are friendly tumors, right? Not friendly. I mean,
not very serious.
Right.
consequences.
It's like that little mole you've always had hanging on your cheek or something, you know? It's always there. It's not going to grow. It's not cancerous. It's always going to be there. And someday, maybe because you want to look more beautiful, you might have it removed, right? But that's the only reason. But then you get something like my aunt. She was in the sun way too much, and she had developed a malignant, growth on her face, and that was cancerous. And it's growing and growing and growing. And if it's not taken care of, she could die from that. So she had it removed, right?
Then
So they found out that half of those were not cancer because they wanted more money, because they get more money if they call it cancer. So even there, that's an intentional bias. It's a lie. But hospitals, when they're short in money and they can get more money from someplace, from the government, or if the manager of the hospital can put more money in his pocket. This is not just Kazakhstan. I've heard these people say, I've heard this in every country I've been in. Oh, that's the attitude of Kazakh. If they can put a lot of money in their pocket and pocket it and walk away, that's just Kazakh. I've heard that in Armenia. I've heard that in Guyana. I know it happens in the U.S., Germany, Spain. It can happen anywhere. If a person can get away with putting money, I wouldn't do it. But there's certain people that will always put money in their pocket if they can get away with it. So that is not a characteristic of Kazakhstan. So if you can get, some data, there's a problem because there was data collected on infant mortality, and I showed from different government sources, same government, the government of Guyana. Now, does anybody know where Guyana is? No, you guys don't know. Where's Guyana? I see you nodding your head, yes. Where is it? You know this country. Anybody? Oh, you're running out of time. Uh-oh. Okay, so it's just a country that's in South America, but there they had 4 different measurements for the 7 states, and they're all with different sources because they had different methodologies of collecting data. This is a problem everywhere. So we have to worry about quality of data, not just in poor countries, but surprisingly in rich countries too, except for maybe Scandinavia. They always have great data because they've carefully have very rigid, rigorous ways of collecting their data.
Okay, you mentioned a little bit about the COVID-19.
Yes.
And I want to talk more about the impact of COVID-19 on global health. Can you?
COVID-19 on global health? Yeah. One thing that's happened is you probably want to wait a while before you apply for a PhD program in epidemiology. When I told people I was in epidemiology before COVID-19, nobody knew what it was. I even had these two PhDs in psychology. I was having dinner with them. Very nice people. PhDs in psychology. And they said, well, Byron, what's your field? I says, epidemiology. Also biostatistics, but I just said epidemiology. And they looked at me and they said, oh, that must be very interesting studying insects. Now, since the pandemic, everybody knows what epidemiology is, and everybody wants to get a PhD in epidemiology because they want to prevent the next pandemic. There was definitely a lot of applications for epidemiology that set up systems that will respond more quickly, more readily to pandemics and epidemics. But right now, I'd wait until it cools down before I'd apply for a PhD in epidemiology. Remember, it's a primary. You get your degree in epidemiology, of course, in a public health school. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And I had a question about the usage of artificial intelligence.
Yes.
in using
Very
it.
interesting question.
So yes, as you know, the artificial intelligence is very widespread now.
Yeah.
It's a
I could be
lot of people use it
artificial
now, like us students also, to calculate some work.
all the time. This is a problem. I hope they didn't write their thesis. They just finished their thesis the second year, their first year,
But
second year. And we hope that they didn't, not too many, well, you can tell because it's kind of fluffy writing still. AI is very, very useful. I'm very familiar with AI because of my physics engineering background and coming into public health, so I have an advantage. 2 limitations on AI, guys. 1, garbage in, garbage out. If you feed, it's a learning system, right? You're talking about machine learning. if you feed lots of bad information, bad data into AI, bad information and bad results will come out. Secondly, some AIs are not built equally. Some AIs have bad coding. The coding's not as good as another one. So this one will produce better products than this one over here. It's a faster and faster. It can do things a lot faster than us. It can't quite do the creativity the way we approach on very creative work. Not yet. But it's very, very useful for research because you can integrate it into finding patterns that maybe it would take us too long. It'd take us maybe 10 years to find patterns. They can go through it and find patterns very quickly. And they can give us some clues on how we can better intervene and make a difference in people's lives. So yeah, there's a usefulness for AI. Maybe not for you guys,
But do you see future
Yes.
of usage of AI in making the process of prediction more optimized in biostatistics?
there is definitely places for it to use. The thing about biostatistics is that when you want to do the actual analysis, there's still things that AI will not see. It will learn, it will improve. It can do certain things very well. It can find patterns in existing data that's already there. But when it comes to doing the actual analysis, you're going to still have to be hands-on to some extent. But working with AI as a partnership, I had an interview, guys. We interviewed people for the Masters of Public Health program internationally, and there was one student was using AI. He was at a distance. He was using the kind where, they put his whole face on some distant person who did the interview, and it was very strange. Very, very strange. It didn't work very well, but it was very interesting to see that happen. I was really tired at the time. I said, this is a very strange interview. He's not close up to the camera. And the choice of words were not educated words from Pakistan, they were more like educated people from the UK specifically. I know the difference in choice of words, but he had a Pakistani accent. But then he was at a great distance, there was interference, and he couldn't respond with specific questions. So it was kind of obvious. But AI, don't become AI, please. Keep your own identity, guys. We're not there yet, I mean, someday, have you seen the movie Yes? Not Yes. What was the movie? She, or her. Where the guy fell in love with AI, and you can see that happening. I thought it would be boring. It wasn't boring at all. Yeah, we're running out of time.
No. I think
Go
I
ahead.
want to ask one question
Please.
about AI. Like you said that AI cannot be fully replaced.
What currently?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I want to ask: are there any parts of your work that AI, where researchers are irreplaceable even in the future?
I think because our neurons are really connected differently. We have multiple connections. AI is still always going to work until we can change the system. It's always going to work with just two connections. Yes, no, 1, 0. It still has more of a linear way of thinking. And because of the way when I told you to rely on your inner voice, I think if you rely more on, I mean, I've been able to solve problems like, this really bothered me. Why was it that people were getting infected after surgery more often, in the summertime than in wintertime? So it was just a matter of that. AI wouldn't be able to resolve that.
I agree with
Not
that.
yet. Maybe AI, but it's got to go through a lot of iterations, maybe many hundreds of years before it can reach that kind of level. The really, really bright people that started this process of creating fire, using fire in our caves and keep us warm and keep away saber-toothed tigers and make bows and arrows and hunting tools and all of these were new technologies. I think AI would still have a hard time creating those at this point. Could that in the future? Maybe. I mean, thousands, hundreds of years from now. Not now. The kind of the individual way we process things intuition,
Yeah.
the way we see it. Maybe, oh, this could be the problem. Maybe I could try this. Maybe I should analyze it this way and see what the data tells me, because I'm always looking for patterns in the data. Maybe it could be this, so I look at different patterns. That
Yeah.
is kind of, that creativity is still something that we have much better control over currently.
Even
I'm not
someti-
going to try and make predictions, but
even sometimes when I try to create some ideas
Mhm.
for, I don't know, essay, speech, anything, it usually gives me the same ideas. They're very similar, they're vague, they're abstract, and there is nothing very creative or original. So like, yeah, I think it may take a lot of effort and time before we can fully rely on AI's creativity and his
I
mindset.
totally agree.
Yeah. So
I won't try and make predictions, but yeah, it's definitely right now. We certainly have we're controlling the whole business of creativity and looking at things in different ways.
So thank you for joining us today. I think this we can now conclude our final thoughts of today. And I'm very happy to see a lot of people here joining us today, to seeing how everything goes behind the scenes of our podcast. This is actually the first time when we invited actual guests and people to see how we
Scary for us, very shy people. Scary.
to
Very
show the
scary.
technical part of the podcast. But apart from that, I got really interested with today's discussion about epidemiology, biostatistics. A lot of myths were uncovered. A lot of new interesting topics were discovered today. So I really hope that our audience as well got a lot of interesting information to digest, and maybe you will have more applicants to the master's program this
That'd
year.
be great, guys.
I hope this affected some of the people.
And I
present
appreciate
here.
you guys. I appreciate what you the amount that you paid me to be here. I was, not just kidding. They didn't pay me.
To be honest, it's my first time as a host, and I'm very
Yes.
happy to have you as a guest.
Thank you.
And as a third-year student, I'm really interested in public
Please,
health.
and you can come talk to me anytime.
And I
Seriously.
want now ask advice, like
Yes.
students like me who are applying for master of public health. What kind of advice?
I think what you're doing here is very, very important. I mean, we're looking at motivated people, and what you're doing here, because I didn't realize that you're really trying to translate, sciences to the general public. That's incredibly important, especially now when there are so many people that are anti-vax, anti-science, anti-medical science, anti-everything. They don't believe anything because they saw somewhere on YouTube. Then somebody told them that aliens from outer space are making everybody sick, and they know that's true. They know it's true because they saw it on YouTube, right? And so it's kind of this is very, very important. What you're doing is extremely important.
So how do you feel about today's podcast?
It was delightful working with you guys. It really was delightful to work with all of you. And it really is something that's really important. I saw, I know some of the people that Gonzalo and others that you've interviewed before. So I think it's really, really important to get the message out of how, of these messages that a lot of people don't hear,
So thank you for tuning into a new SciPod. We hope that you enjoyed today's deep dive into the world of global health epidemiology and the vital role of data in shaping better health outcomes. So stay curious, stay inspired, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Goodbye.